good day, one and all friends and foes. You know who you are. I'm Cal, and you're listening to Missing Links Movie Podcast, the weekly movie news podcast. We're going to spend a bit of time going over our top billed articles, new trailers, and release dates, and what's opening in theaters this week. We have some really interesting stuff about the Writers and Actors Guild strikes, the Golden Globes, Studio Ghibli. Lots of things to talk about, so whether you're a fan of The Green Mile, The Color Purple, Black Swan, or Red Dawn, this is a show for you. I'm live on Spotify and YouTube on the channel Missing Link Movies. So without further ado, let's introduce our top billed stories this week. Our first one comes from The Hollywood Reporter, Katie Kilkenny and Leslie Goldberg. Writers Guild reveals details of tentative deal with studios on AI, data transparency, mini rooms, and more. The union reached a provisional agreement, still subject to member ratification, with Hollywood's top studios and streamers on Sunday night. So, I think last week we talked about how the writers and the representatives from the Producers Guild Producers Guild were meeting, but we hadn't yet heard what the results of that were, and it sounds like they were able to reach an agreement that was satisfactory for both parties. And this is probably gonna, be a little bit of a longer story because there's so much to it. But let's take a look here at the article. All right. It says restrictions on the use of AI, minimum staffing in television writers' rooms, and a viewership-based streaming bonus. Those are some of the many deal points in the Writers Guild of America's tentative 3-year contract deal with studios and streamers, the details of which were released to union members Tuesday. The highly anticipated pact also includes provisions that enshrine a second step for screenwriter deals, higher foreign residuals, and annual minimum pay increases of 5%, 4%, and 3.5% over the course of the contract. So there's, let's see how, if we narrow it down to different kind of areas that were, that they came to a deal on. First is AI technology. So let's look at that. When it comes to rapidly developing AI technology, the union secured protections against AI penning or rewriting original material under the MBA or being used as source material to adapt. Writers can still use AI as a tool if the company they're working for allows it. However, they cannot be required to use it, and companies must disclose if they are giving writers any AI-generated material during the writing process. In addition, the WGA reserves the right to assert that exploitation of writers' material to train AI is prohibited by MBA or other law, the union stated in its summary. So this was one of the primary things that the strike was against, was about artificial intelligence, and not only using it in the place of writers, but also using writers' work to train artificial intelligence. Because AI, when it creates things, it's not pulling them out of whole cloth. It's recontextualizing, being adapted from, taking in. There's an input that goes into AI, and so in the case of when AI is writing stuff, it's taking things that have already been written, processing them, and then outputting them into new things. And so the writers want to be able to prevent AI using their work to train it. And the other thing, of course, is to prevent studios from using AI. So, and it doesn't sound like they were able to prevent studios outright from using AI to write at all, but just writers will not be required to use AI. Studios have to disclose whether they are using AI, etc. So it is still available to use, it looks like, but they were able to come to a compromise with how it's used. So that's kind of the first part of the deal. The second part is the part that I was personally most interested in as an outside observer, as a lay person. But this next part is about streaming and residuals for streaming shows. Let's see. And so the article says the union proposed to establish a viewership-based residual in addition to existing fixed residual to reward programs with greater viewership and to require transparency regarding program views. Its compromise with studios was establishing a new residual that would reward projects that are viewed by 20% or more of the service's domestic subscribers in the first 90 days of release or in the first 90 days of any subsequent exhibition year. Made for streaming films and series would incur a bonus of 50% if it's of its fixed domestic and foreign residual once it hit that benchmark. Let's see, resulting in some numbers that I won't go too into detail, just trying to get you the basic facts. As for streaming transparency, the compromise was limited. The union will have confidential access to the total number of hours streamed, both domestically and internationally, of self-produced high-budget streaming programs, aka a Netflix original series, and may share information with the membership in aggregated form. So in other words, there will be somewhat more transparency, but the streaming services aren't exactly opening up their troves of data for public consumption. So that part is really interesting to me because I was really interested in getting the hard facts, getting the hard numbers on streaming, because with theatrically released films, we have the box office, and so we have hard numbers that we can put on films coming out. And even things like TV had I think they were called the Nielsen numbers. I can't remember the name for it, but in fact, actually, now that I think about it, Nielsen might be the name of the streaming ratings, but I can't recall. No, it is Nielsen. Yeah, Nielsen is what they use for TV, and Nielsen has started to get into streaming, views, but it's just harder to do when studios, when the studios themselves are, like owning these streaming services and, keeping that data very private. And so it's interesting that rather than, I think what was the hope was that these numbers be made public, for wide consumption. It looks like the compromise with that is the studios will let the union know, but it'll be confidential, and in some aggregated form. So that is interesting. And it doesn't mention it here, but I believe the way they are measuring success is I believe the number of minutes watched divided by the total runtime of the film or series. And that is how they're deciding how many quote unquote views it has. Because, versus a movie theater where someone purchases a ticket and then they're in it for the whole movie or not, I guess if they don't show up or something. But with streaming numbers, it's like, someone may watch half a series, drop off. Someone might watch the first few minutes and, decide it's not for them. Someone may rewatch it a few times. So the way that they will measure success is, again, the total number of minutes watched divided by the runtime. So that's how they're going to measure that. But they just won't release those numbers publicly. All right, and so first was AI. Second was streaming residuals, transparency. Third is writer's room size. And needless to say, I'm not super familiar with writer's rooms and how they work, how they have worked, what they wanted. It's kind of the area that I'm the most hazy on. But in summary, the Writers Guild was able to secure deals ensuring that writers would be employed for longer, that a minimum number of writers in the writer's room was guaranteed. Like, for example, the article says here, the tentative agreement includes a minimum staff size of 3 writer-producers for a first season show for development rooms running 20 weeks or longer, with a formula for additional seasons tied to the number of episodes. So it was one of the thorniest issues because showrunners previously were able to determine the size of their writing staffs. The WGA pushed for minimum room size requirements in a bid to prevent studios and streamers from employing AI as a means to save costs on scribes. So this one is kind of tied into the AI thing, is they wanted to be able to guarantee a minimum number of writers so that studios wouldn't be able to just cop out on paying more writers and use AI instead. Other gains included span, the length of time writers will be employed on scripted shows, with development rooms now guaranteed at least 10 consecutive weeks, post-greenlight rooms securing 20 weeks, or the duration of the room. Interesting. So, yeah, again, that is the compromise they were able to come to on writers' room size. I wish I had someone with me to help explain, is that a huge change? Is that a necessary compromise? I'm not sure, but I'd be interested to know more. And then next we have a let's see. So AI, streaming transparency / residuals, writer's room size, and then general residuals. So the strike asked for a cumulative 16% increase in residuals over the 3-year MBA and wound up with 12.5%. The union also additionally secured an increase in the employer contribution to the union's health fund based on reportable earnings of 0.5% in the second year of the contract, going from 11.5 to 12%. Screenwriters clinched a guaranteed second step or a point of payment in their deals whenever a writer is hired for a first draft screenplay for 200% of minimum or less, including original and non-original screenplays. The union gained the new foreign residual formula that the Directors Guild of America earned in its 2023 deal, which bases payment on the number of services foreign subscribers. The union seemingly did not secure a commitment from the AMPTP that would allow union members to refuse to cross other unions' picket lines without consequences, as they asked for starting in August, as SAG-AFTRA remains out on strike. So that's kind of a summary of the strike, a summary of the agreement of the contract. However, it is not set in stone quite yet. The strike is over. The writers are able to return to work. But what remains is a ratification vote from the members of the union. And all they need is a majority of eligible voters to support the deal. And then that is in place for 3 years, is the contract length. And that ratification vote will start October 2nd and go through October 9th. So the union members will have a week to vote to ratify it. If it doesn't, then the union will have to go back to the Producers Guild and try again. But from what I am seeing, kind of the word on the street seems to be that this might be as good as it gets. It doesn't reach the maximum get that the writers were asking for, that the union was asking for, but it does have some compromises that hopefully will still be satisfactory to most of the members. So good for them. Hope they're pleased with the outcome, and looking forward to this kind of new age. This was like a historic strike. They hadn't been on strike this long, I think, since the 80s. So this was a pretty big deal, and we'll see if I think so. Yeah, so not next week, but the week after. On the podcast, I guess we'll know whether it was ratified or not. All right, our next story kind of segues into the other strike going on, the SAG-AFTRA, the Actors Guild strike. And I believe they are meeting on Monday with producers, but the story that I wanted to highlight from this week comes straight from the SAG-AFTRA website. The headline says, SAG-AFTRA members approve video game strike authorization vote with 98.32% yes vote. SAG-AFTRA members have voted 98.32% in favor of a strike authorization on the interactive media agreement that covers members' work on video games, 34,687 members cast ballots, representing a voting percentage of 27.47% of eligible voters. The strike authorization does not mean the union is calling a strike. SAG-AFTRA has been in interactive media agreement negotiations with signatory video game companies since October 2022. Throughout the negotiations, the companies have refused to offer acceptable terms on some of the issues most critical to our members, including wages that keep up with inflation, protections around exploitative uses of artificial intelligence, and basic safety precautions. The next bargaining session is scheduled for September 26th, 27th, and 28th. Oh, okay, so that's now. That's from me. And we hope the added leverage of a successful strike authorization vote will compel the companies to make significant movement on critical issues where we are still far apart. So I think up until now, SAG-AFTRA were, on strike from movies, films, TV, and things of that nature. But interactive media, like video games, I think they are still available to work for. However, this latest development shows that the union is authorizing a strike. So we will see, I guess, whether they will call a strike officially from video game companies. But as of now, it's something that they, are authorized to do. And I wanted to put this in there because, it's a big development. I mean, this is just another example of just the I don't want to use the word spiraling, but just like the domino effect of as not just in the film and TV business, but just all over every industry. People want their wages to keep up with inflation. They want to be guaranteed rights and protections. With AI, it's causing a lot of concern, and and so that is affecting not just, the movie and TV fields specifically, but spinning off into video games and other creative fields. Even in the work that I do in my day job, we're starting to use AI for different things, and it's something I'm trying to figure out and come to terms with, because it's not necessarily replacing people, but it is like being used in addition to, and there is potential. Honestly, if I'm being completely honest, there is potential for it replacing people, and in my line of work in my day job, and I can only imagine it can do the same for people like actors. Especially with video games, I think it's a big part of it. More and more recently, as technology has enabled motion capture and really detailed performances from actors, many higher budget AAA games in the last few years have started to use more actors that have made a name for themselves. You had people like Mads Mikkelsen and Norman Reedus in Hideo Kojima's Death Stranding. You have actors like Christopher Judge from the God of War games. And so you're getting more and more involvement from bigger actors in these games with the level of performances that video games are able to capture, and they want to be able to make sure that they're able to own that performance, that they're able to be fairly compensated for it as well, which is great. That's awesome. So our next story is about the Golden Globes. That is coming up, the awards season. This is coming from Variety, Matt Donnelly. The Golden Globe Awards will introduce 2 new categories to its upcoming January broadcast, Variety has learned exclusively. The categories will honor hit movies with global reach in either box office or streaming views, as well as acknowledge the best performance in a stand-up comedy special. The first new prize is the Golden Globe for cinematic and box office achievement. Eligible nominees will be among the year's highest earning or most seen feature films that also deliver creative excellence. Titles must have grossed at least $150 million during release, $100 million of which must have come from the domestic box office. Streaming films with commensurate viewership will be considered based on data from, quote, recognized industry sources, the Globe said. 8 films will be eligible for that prize and can also compete for categories like Best Motion Picture Drama or Comedy, as long as they meet the criteria for those different fields. The second new category, Best Performance in Stand-Up Comedy or on Television, recognizes outstanding work from a comic in a traditional stand-up format, or as a breakout comic in a troupe or ensemble. Comedy specials airing on broadcast, basic, and premium cable, streaming, and pay-per-view cable will be considered. Projects must have a recognized distributor, and individual social media accounts will not be eligible. So this comes from Golden Globes president Helen Hone. The Golden Globes has a rich history of supporting and celebrating the work of comedians, and we're thrilled to honor their brilliance alongside outstanding motion picture and television performances of the year. Additionally, we are proud to recognize the hard work and innovation that goes into making a film that is both a blockbuster and artistically exceptional. Right. So, and then the rest of the article has like the, very, again, the detailed eligibility rules for those things. So this is interesting. This is kind of a big deal because awards shows like the Golden Globes, like the Academy Awards, have seen general trends downward in terms of viewership and things like that. And personal opinion, I think these are opportunities that the Golden Globes is this is an opportunity that the Golden Globes sees to pull in some new eyes, some new viewers, some new audiences, in recognizing the movies that have been seen by more general audiences. And the stand-up comics as well, I think, is a reflection of the inclusion of having these comics, is just a reflection of how a lot of streaming services are putting these comedy specials up on their services. And I think on both counts, it's an attempt, by the Golden Globes to try to pull more viewers, pull in an audience. And I think that, that is their goal here, because ultimately that is how they're getting a lot of, that's the only reason any of these awards have any power, is on recognition, right? And if they can get more eyes, more, a bigger audience, then they are more recognized and seen as more legitimate. So I think that's what we're seeing here. And the Academy as well has, tried repeatedly over the last few years, dropping some awards, the presentation of some awards from their live broadcast, putting them back in, trying to shake things up in an effort to, increase their viewership. But we'll see what they pull this year, I guess. But that's the Academy Awards, which this is not about. This is about the Golden Globes. So this is interesting, and I'm sure the movies that we'll see for those awards, particularly, the cinematic and box office achievement, will be movies that more people have heard of. But I find that generally the Golden Globes kind of already, for a lot of their nominations, are nominating films that are more widely recognized than the Academy Awards. But I'm sure that will be even more so for the cinematic and box office achievement. Our next story is a bit of a shorter one. So this comes from CNN. Jesse Young and Francesca Anio. Studio Ghibli sold to Nippon TV after finding no successors for Hayao Miyazaki. The iconic Japanese animation company Studio Ghibli, which created internationally beloved films including My Neighbor Totoro and Spirited Away, has been sold to Nippon TV after failing to find a successor for its legendary co-founder and director, Hayao Miyazaki. The two companies' board of directors met on Thursday and approved a resolution for Nippon TV to acquire shares of Studio Ghibli, making it a subsidiary of the television network, the company said in a joint statement. The financial terms of the deal were not disclosed. So the statement said, with director Hayao Miyazaki now 82 years old and producer Toshio Suzuki also 75, Studio Ghibli has long been struggling with the issue of their successors. Nippon TV will permanently, quote, permanently protect Studio Ghibli's craftsmanship and brand values and intends to honor Studio Ghibli's autonomy so it can focus on filmmaking. So you may be thinking that, wait a minute, doesn't Miyazaki's like son, he directed Tales to Earthsea, the Earwig, and the Witch film that came out a couple years ago. Both have been said to be some of Studio Ghibli's like worst films. However, the article goes on to say that it added that Miyazaki's eldest son, himself an animation film director, had been repeatedly suggested as a possible successor to his father, but he had declined the idea, claiming that it would be difficult for him to take over Ghibli on his own and that it would be better to leave the future of Ghibli to someone else. So this has been something that has been in question for some years because Miyazaki announced his retirement back in 2013 when I think the Wind Rises came out. And then that prompted another co-founder, Suzuki, to say that they needed to change. Things needed. They needed to look at some things in regards to how the business or how the studio is going to be run. However, Miyazaki did not end up retiring in 2013. Ended up working on the film The Boy and the Heron, which is just coming out. It came out in Japan a few months ago. It's coming out in here in the States in a couple months, and he's been working on it for several years. But it appears possibly that this may be his final film. Even if it's not, it does sound like his tenure as being a director of the studio is over, and wants to hand it off to other people at the fine folks at Nippon TV. The article goes on to say Nippon TV and Studio Ghibli have long worked together, with the former broadcasting Ghibli films on air, investing in Ghibli movie productions, and even helping fund the Ghibli Museum, the statement said. Nippon TV will become the largest Ghibli shareholder with 42.3% of the voting rights. And that is what we have about that. So an interesting development, kind of end of an era for Studio Ghibli. They haven't always been independent. They were a subsidiary of a different company. I can't remember the name. For many years, I think till about the mid 2000s, and then since the mid 2000s, they've been independent. And then now with this latest statement or latest development, they're now a subsidiary of Nippon TV. So we can only hope that that they'll live up to that promise of what does it say? Protecting Studio Ghibli's craftsmanship and brand values, and intends to honor their autonomy so they can focus on filmmaking. Because we are seeing a lot of conglomeration, not only in the film business, but in other media industries as well. I'm particularly thinking of, the video game world, a lot of conglomeration and things going on. But there are still, a lot of places out there that are able to maintain, their unique voice and unique perspective. And I think Studio Ghibli is one of the most, one of the best studios for having its own unique voice. And I feel like a lot of that is due to Miyazaki, the elder, the elder. But hopefully with his possible retirement, as well as Suzuki's, that they can continue to find talent that will give us, that very important and great space in film, and particularly animation, in the animation world of things. Excuse me. So next one we've got from Deadline, Justin Kroll. I imagine that's not just Nick Kroll. I'm thinking of Nick Kroll. Sorry. Deadline's Justin Kroll. Marvel Studios execs eye meeting soon to hear writers' pitches for a coveted X-Men job. So this is an exclusive. With a deal in place with the Writers Guild, studios have begun taking aim at setting writers for their open assignments. Marvel Studios is looking to set the bar with what will likely become one of the more sought-after jobs for any scribe. Sources tell Deadline that Marvel will start setting writer meetings later this fall for pitches on its anticipated X-Men movie. Insiders add there is no rush to fill the job since the film hasn't been dated yet, and it's more than likely that writer decision will be made at the top of 2024. Marvel declined comment. All right, so this is really, really cool because Marvel Studios has been under the purview of Disney for the last several years, and until Disney bought Fox, the X-Men realm of the Marvel Comics franchise was under the pure purview of Fox. But once Disney bought them, again, there's that conglomeration we're talking about. After Disney bought them, they were able to get the rights to the X-Men characters in Marvel Comics. But there hasn't really been any word on what their plans are to do with that IP. So I'm a huge comics fan, to be quite honest. So I'm like really into that area when it comes to, two of my favorite things, comics and film crossing over. So I'm constantly following the latest on these things, and this is a significant step forward because they have not really said a word on what their plans are with X-Men. I mean, even now, Marvel declined to comment on this story. So this is, you could say this is just rumor. The sources are anonymous, but from what I understand, Deadline is pretty reliable and dependable when it comes to stuff like this. So we could possibly see an X-Men movie coming from Marvel Studios in the next 3 to 4 years. Where, Marvel has announced several films coming out through 2028, I think. So the fact that this could come somewhere in between films that they have already announced is interesting, considering, they hadn't officially, still haven't officially, said anything about an X-Men movie. But that does, it does remain to be said that they do plan on releasing a continuation of the animated X-Men show from the 90s. They're coming out with another season or two. I don't think there's an official date on that, but that is separate and distinct from the shared universe of the Marvel movies. Because it'll be animated, it'll be a Disney Plus original. But this seems to be an indication of a live-action X-Men movie taking place in that Marvel Cinematic Universe. So that could be exciting. Personally, so as a comic fan, what I'd like to see is just a return to the roots of the X-Men comics, which if you're only familiar with the movies, it seems to be all centered around, the Wolverine character and with a lot of the conflicts that take place between Magneto, between people trying to end mutants. There's parts of that do come from the comics, but I'd really like to see a fresh team, because there are countless, there are dozens, hundreds of mutants and X-Men in the comics. But with the movies, they always, seem to have the same core 4 or 5 characters with, a rotating roster of other that would pop in for a movie and then inexplicably be gone for the next one, or get sidelined because they break a leg or whatever. Looking at you, Quicksilver. So we will hope. I would hope to see a new cast. In particular, I say this, but then I'm going to follow this up with something very hypocritical. But I'd like to see a different take on the Cyclops character. He was on the first. He was in the first 3 X-Men films that came out in the 2000s, but I just felt like it was a very poorly written character compared to how he's in the comics, where he's much more of a leader, has much more interesting character development in terms of his internal struggle with being a leader and what side of the mutant human conflict he should take part in. So I'd love to see that, but I'd also like to see some other comics, X-Men characters from the comics make their debut or just have a different take on them. So I hope that checks out. I hope we start hearing more about that soon. And then, so our final top billed story we're going to talk about is a bit of a sad one. So this one is coming from NPR's Andrew Limbong. Michael Gambon, who played Dumbledore in Harry Potter, dies at 82. Actor Michael Gambon, who is best known for playing Albus Dumbledore in the Harry Potter series of movies, has died. He was 82. We are devastated to announce the loss of Sir Michael Gambon, read a statement from his publicist. Beloved husband and father, Michael, died peacefully in hospital with his wife Anne and son Fergus at his bedside following a bout of pneumonia. Gambon took over the role of Albus Dumbledore following the death of actor Richard Harris. He brought a different wow, that's a typo in an NPR article. Wow. He brought a different tenor to the role, one intentionally disparate from the character's portrayal in the original books. In 2009, he told the LA Times that since he was dealing with the screenwriter's words, he saw no point in reading the books. Awesome. Just a brief synopsis of his career. He started his acting career on stage, was hired by Laurence Olivier to join in the National Theatre's first production, Hamlet. He won multiple awards for his stage acting, including 3 Olivier Awards. He became a big name actor and a big name screen actor in Britain after starring in the 1986 BBC series The Singing Detective. That role earned him his first of 4 BAFTA awards, which are the British awards for screen. Gambon was knighted in 1998. Let's see. He was a versatile actor, showing up in film and television roles besides Harry Potter, such as Paddington, Hail Caesar, and the BBC's adaptation of J.K. Rowling's novel The Casual Vacancy. And I actually like this. He was an admirer of Rowling's work, but that wasn't his top priority as an actor. I didn't do Harry Potter because she wrote it, Gambon said in an interview. I did it because I wanted the money. Great. Way to be. So, yeah, a bit sad. But, I mean, he was pretty advanced in years, even doing the Harry Potter movies, the last of which came out, over 10 years ago now. So, rather sad. I don't think I saw him in too much besides Harry Potter. I did watch Paddington, but he played a very small part in that movie. It wasn't in it very long. I was thinking, when I first heard the news, I was thinking that he played English Bob in Clint Eastwood's Unforgiven, but I was thinking of Richard Harris, the first Dumbledore. He was English Bob in that movie. So I haven't seen Michael Gambon in too much else besides Harry Potter, but he was a fantastic actor, and hope that his family is able to feel at peace, with his passing. So that's a wrap on our top stories, and so now we will continue with the new segment I started last week, which is, I say new, but it's relatively new because this is only the 4th episode of the podcast in general. But this is the grab bag segment that I want to come up with a more fitting name for a movie podcast. So maybe maybe our spin-off stories, because we have the top build stories and then we have like our spin-off stories. The analogy only goes so far because top build is for actors, spin-off is for projects. So I don't know. This is coming from the Hollywood Reporter. Film Academy to replace, by Scott Feinberg. Film Academy to replace Hattie McDaniel's long-missing Gone with the Wind Oscar. The first competitive Oscar ever awarded to a black person, the Best Supporting Actress Oscar that Hattie McDaniel won for her performance in Gone with the Wind in 1940, went missing from Howard University sometime in the late 1960s, to which McDaniel bequeathed it after her death in 1952. But on Tuesday, the Academy of Motion Pictures, Arts and Sciences announced that it will be rectifying the situation by gifting Howard University's Chadwick A. Boseman College of Fine Arts a replacement Oscar. The one that McDaniel received in 1940 was not a statuette, but a plaque, as all supporting acting winners received from 1936 to 1942. But the replacement will be a proper Oscar, which will be presented at a celebration of McDaniel's life and legacy at Howard's Ira Aldrich Theater on October 1st, entitled Hattie's Come Home. So they're having a whole event where, to surround this with some opening remarks by the dean of the College of Fine Arts at Howard University, a performance of a medley of songs from current students and faculty. excerpt. Wow. Yeah. So they are going to town, celebrating this, which is really cool. I tried looking to see if it was going to be live streamed or, broadcast anywhere, but it looks like it'll be just its own thing taking place at Howard University. But really cool that they're doing this. I am very what a wild thing that her Oscar was just. I mean, it says it went missing, disappeared sometime in the late 1960s. It was probably stolen, right? I mean, they don't provide any other details, so I can't imagine they misplaced it in transit if they wanted to. I feel like they would say that if that were the case, but I'm imagining it was probably stolen. But that's awesome that they're replacing it with not just a plaque, as she originally received, but like a whole Oscar statuette. So that's fun. Like I said, that's the only story we have for Grab Bag this week. Our next section is our new trailers / release dates. Our first one we're going to talk about is Matthew Vaughn's Argylle. So this is a new spy action comedy film directed and produced by Matthew Vaughn, who did, if you remember, the Kingsman movies. He did the Kingsman movies and X-Men First Class, which, is considered to be one of the better X-Men movies. And the Kingsman movies are considered to be pretty good, at least the first one. The second one, The Golden Circle, I don't think was received quite as well. But the trailer looks pretty cool. I mean, it's kind of following in his vein of, because the Kingsman movies were both spy action comedy movies. And so this looks like a return to form for Matthew Vaughn. The film features an ensemble cast. You've got Henry Cavill, Bryce Dallas Howard, Sam Rockwell, Bryan Cranston, Catherine O'Hara, Dua Lipa, Ariana DeBose, John Cena, Samuel L. Jackson. So an incredible cast. The synopsis reads, Ellie Conway, played by Bryce Dallas Howard, an introverted spy novelist who seldom leaves her home, is drawn into the real world of espionage when the plots of her books get a little too close to the activities of a sinister underground syndicate. When Aiden, Sam Rockwell, a spy, shows up to save her, he says, from being kidnapped or killed, or both, Ellie and her beloved cat Alfie are plunged into a covert world where nothing and no one is what it seems. So the trailer does set that up where, there's this really handsome spy guy played by Henry Cavill, who is a character in Bryce Dallas Howard's character's books. So she's writing these spy thriller books, and it turns out that the things she's writing in her books are actually happening. And I don't think it's meant to be a supernatural thing where she is precognizant or she's psychic or whatever. It just seems to be that she's just coincidentally writing these stories that are actually playing out in real life with real spies. And so they kind of start coming after her to, figure out what's going on. And she gets swept up into into this world of spies. So it looks like a really fun movie. Again, the cast looks great. The cat, not the cast, but the cat, I'm not so sure about because it was a very obviously CGI cat, which I can only imagine they had to do with all the action and stunts going on that they weren't going to use a real cat. But it didn't look like a great CGI cat. That being said, overall, it looks like a really great movie. Actually, here in the Wikipedia, it says, in the cast, it says Chip as Alfie, Conway's cat. Chip is the real-life cat of model Claudia Schiffer, Matthew Vaughn's wife. So I guess they are using a real cat for part of it, but a lot of it looks CGI. So that movie's coming out February 2nd, 2024, but it is going to Apple TV Plus as well. Our next trailer that we got was Wish, Disney's film coming out this fall. I think we had already gotten some teaser trailers for this, but I think this was the first full trailer. This is kind of, I don't want to call it Disney's biggest film of the year necessarily, but one of Disney's biggest films because it's their 100th anniversary, which they're having a heck of a year, and it's kind of about the wishing star that you see a lot in these Disney movies. Actually, has the wishing star ever been in a movie besides Pinocchio? Because, I mean, I don't think Cinderella wished on a star to go to the ball. I don't know. Snow White didn't wish on a star. There was a wishing well. There was a wishing well in Snow White. She kind of sung to that. Anyways, but that's neither here or there. But the premise for this one says, in the kingdom of Rosas, located off of the Iberian Peninsula. Oh, so this is like real world. Okay, this isn't a fantasy world. Interesting. A 17-year-old girl named Asha senses a darkness that no one else does about the kingdom's ruler, King Magnifico. This eventually leads to her trying to make a passionate plea to the stars in a moment of need. Soon, an actual star from the sky, named Star, answers Asha's wish. After the star falls from the sky, it is revealed that the star has magical powers to grant wishes as well. Together, Asha and Star must overcome the evils rising in Rosas to fight for a better future in order to have something better than what they already have and for all dreams to come true for the people of Rosas. So this was an interesting trailer. It delved a bit into the plot a bit more. So there's this king of the kingdom who has the ability to grant wishes, but Asha kind of becomes his apprentice in a sense, or some kind of assistant or apprentice. And she discovers that he doesn't grant every wish that the town wants, that every citizen wants. He picks and chooses which wishes to grant, which the trailer doesn't really explain like why that's necessarily a bad thing. I mean, I imagine it's because it's a Disney movie that everyone's wishes will be like inherently, beneficial and good. But it's like presenting the king as this secretive sort of manipulator or like villain, really, because he doesn't grant every wish. But I only imagine it's because in this world, people's wishes are like, oh, I wish to, be a better person, and which is the opposite of what we saw in like Wonder Woman 84, where the whole thing of that movie was everyone's wishes are inherently like selfish and negative. I think this will be the opposite, where there are people wanting good wishes, but the king, for whatever reason, is preventing those wishes from being granted. So then, Asha, becomes friends with the star, and they're doing stuff. That part of the plot in the trailer wasn't too explained, but it just sounds like generally she's trying to put a stop to this villain king who's not granting all the wishes. How dare he? So, as in terms of how the film looks, it does look like a departure from Disney's usual fare, which I like. However, it's not quite to the level of quality that we've seen in like Spider-Verse or Puss in Boots: The Last Wish or Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem. It's like almost there. It's like trying to push that 2D style, where trying to call back to Disney's roots, but it's still 3D. The backgrounds looked great. I will say the backgrounds looked great, the layouts, but the characters themselves, they tried to give them a flat-ish 2D look, but they're still 3D, and so it almost looks like there's a texture layer missing or something. I can't quite place it, but other movies like Spider-Verse, Puss in Boots that have been doing this blended 2D, 3D style have done a lot of post-processing work to make these things pop and to really make them come to life and look really great. But whatever it is, I feel like Wish is missing it. It's like not quite hitting that mark. Again, I don't know quite what it is, but it just looks a little too flat to where it doesn't look cel-shaded. It doesn't look like a particular creative choice. It just kind of looks flat. Like it doesn't really pop. They don't pop out of the backgrounds. They don't, it looks like they're trying to kind of blend them in with the 2D backgrounds while still being 3D, but it doesn't quite work. Last trailer we got was, not the last trailer in general, but just the last trailer we wanted to talk about was The Toxic Avenger, which is a remake of the 1984 movie. This one is set in a fantasy world following Winston, a stereotypical weakling who works as a janitor, diagnosed with a terminal illness that can only be cured by an expensive treatment. that his greedy, power-hungry employer refuses to pay for. After deciding to take matters into his own hands and rob his company, Winston falls into a pit of toxic waste and is transformed into a deformed monster that sets out to do good and get back at all the people who have wronged him. So this sounds like a superhero movie, but it's a black comedy, sort of superhero spoof. I don't know if spoof is the right word, or parody or satire, but I wasn't familiar with this like franchise or like with this thing being a remake until I started hearing about this movie, because I understand the original 1984 Toxic Avenger is a pretty like cult film. But for this one, they've got some bigger names. They've got Peter Dinklage playing the main character. They've got Jacob Tremblay, who's had a very great career for being so young. I think he's like still a teenager, but Kevin Bacon's in it. Elijah Wood's in it. So we got some names. But the trailer, it's like very violent, very graphic. Lots of swearing. So it's definitely like a more mature kind of thing. However, I didn't see like when this is coming to theaters. I'm sure it will, right? It might be a limited release. I don't know, but it was more just a new trailer and showing that it was going to premiere at it already premiered at Fantastic Fest, which was weird, because the trailer is new. We'll see. I think maybe they're trying to gauge some support, trying to see how much people would want that to have a wide release in theaters. So, but we'll see. That one does look like it could be a fun time. Rotten Tomatoes, it's gotten generally positive ratings on Rotten Tomatoes. So that's good for them. So that's about it. Our last section are, what is coming out this weekend to look out for. We've got The Creator. That is Gareth Edwards' movie that we talked about last week. Really excited for that. Probably definitely going to see that, in the next couple of days. We've got Dumb Money. That's the GameStop stock one. Saw X or Saw 10, the latest in that horror franchise. Paw Patrol, the Mighty Movie. Oh my goodness, every kid in the world is going to go see that, I think. I don't know. Does anyone watch Paw Patrol? I don't know anyone who watches Paw Patrol. Stop Making Sense, which I believe we talked about last week. I don't know. The Kill Room, which is a thriller with Samuel L. Jackson, Maya Hawke, Uma Thurman. Ooh, that might be one to look at. 57 Seconds, which is a sci-fi thriller with Morgan Freeman, Josh Hutcherson. What? Carlos, a documentary. Invisible Beauty, another documentary. And then Warrior Strong, which, hadn't heard of that one. So that's what we've got releasing this weekend. I'm probably going to see The Creator, might see The Kill Room, might see 57 Seconds. Those sound like wait for reviews, kind of see how those are doing. But that about does it for today. Now that we're on YouTube, like I said last week, I'd like to hear more from the audience about what you've been watching or anything like that, stories that you think are worth mentioning. But that's a wrap for this episode 4 of Missing Links Movie Podcast. Thanks for listening, and I guess we'll now return to your regularly scheduled life.